Good evening, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you're joining from. We're just going to wait for a few more people to join, then we'll get started. Why don't you just put your name in the chat saying where you're joining from? Hi, Guy from Southend. Thanks for joining. If you are just joining, thank you for joining us. Christine, hello again. Carol G. Hi there, Linda. Hi, Peter. Thanks for joining. Good to have you all with us. Looks like we'll have a relatively small group this evening, which is good for you guys because a better opportunity to get your questions answered. So if you do have any questions, just pop them in the Q&A and there'll be 15-20 minutes for me to go through questions at the end. So any questions you've got, let me know. Anna from Sweden, hello. If you are just joining now, we're just going to wait a few more minutes for make sure everyone's joined, and then we'll get started. Great. Okay, let's get started. So thank you everyone for joining. I've got a presentation ready for you guys. So you're probably wondering, why have I started with a picture of a nose? Are you in the right place? Have you come to the right place? Yes, this is a tinnitus webinar. Let me ask you a question. When was the last time you noticed your nose out of the corner of your vision? Probably quite a long time ago. Hi, Rick from Arizona. Probably quite a long time ago. But what if I replaced the word nose with tinnitus? And I asked you, when was the last time you noticed your tinnitus? Probably quite recently. Imagine if we could do the same thing to your tinnitus, what your brain's already done to your nose. Your nose is still visible if you look at it, but your brain just never registered it. You never notice it. And I'm going to tell you today about how you can tune out tinnitus, or the way to tune out tinnitus. So we are going to learn about 4 things today. Number 1, a message of hope. You don't just have to learn to live with it. I'm sure many of you have been told something along these lines. You don't have to learn to live with it. Number 2, why we notice tinnitus, and off the back of that, how we can stop noticing tinnitus. Number 3, how it feels to tune out tinnitus and reduce our awareness of it. And 4, the clinically proven methods that really work. And you're all here to learn more about our one-to-one coaching program. At the end, I'll tell you about that and how we deliver this program and how it works, and how you'll benefit. Just a bit of background about us. So we're a team of doctors, audiologists, tinnitus researchers, psychologists. We've got one of the world's top tinnitus teams, and we've helped over 70,000 people tune out tinnitus using the methods that I'm going to talk to you about today. We've got a lot of experience with tinnitus. We know it better than anyone else. Okay, going back to this. I'm sure probably every person here, if not every person, has been told by their doctor something along the lines of, there's nothing you can do. or you need to just go and learn to live with it. Now, that's just not true. Not true, okay? There's loads you can do for tinnitus. And unfortunately, it's because, the doctors have got it wrong, probably through no fault of their own. When I went through medical school as a doctor, very little education about tinnitus, and they just don't have resources available to them. And this is a picture of me graduating RAF College Cranwell as a medical officer a few years ago now. I experienced this first. I had tinnitus myself. I've had tinnitus for about 3.5 years. And B, when I was a doctor in the Royal Air Force, I saw loads of people with quite bad tinnitus. And it was then I saw how difficult it was for people to access help. And that's when I realized, okay, I need to do something about this. I need to build something that will help people with tinnitus get access to a solution. Okay, so just before I explain how this works, I want you to think back. What was the feeling that you had when your tinnitus first started, or when your tinnitus first got bad? What was the emotion it made you feel? Why didn't you guys put it in the chat? I'll put how it made me feel. It made me feel anxious and worried. And I'm sure for you guys, it made you feel pretty bad as well. Susan, anxious and depressed. That's really common, really, really common for tinnitus to make us feel that way. Despondent, alarmed, terrified, frightened. Peter, yeah, exactly. You're thinking, God, I can't even manage this for the rest of the day. How am I going to put up with this the rest of my life? Fearful, anxious, sick, scared. All really, really horrible feelings. Really horrible feelings. And that's normal for tinnitus to make us feel that way. But because it makes us feel that way, because it makes us feel bad, your brain registers the tinnitus as a threat. Your brain thinks, okay, there's this thing that's making me feel really bad. I need to keep checking to see whether this thing is there because it's a threat. This thing is a danger to me. I need to keep checking for it. So what many of you will probably experience is the first thing that happens when you go into a quiet room, for example, when you wake up in the morning and it's quiet, when you go to bed and it's quiet, the first thing that you'll do when you go into that environment is check to see if your tinnitus is there. And that's because your brain, you can't help it. Your brain is doing it automatically. Your brain is checking for that threat. So your brain is checking for this threat all the time, which means you noticed it all the time. And then, of course, when you notice it, it makes us feel bad. For many of you, your tinnitus may have improved somewhat, and it might not make you feel panicky or fearful or anxious. It might make you feel frustrated or annoyed, but it's still making us feel bad. And because it's making us feel bad, that negative emotion that we feel, your brain is still thinking of this as a threat, which means it needs to keep checking for this. You notice it, it makes you feel bad. If anyone's just going to stop for a second, if anyone has any questions, by the way, about any of this, please put them in the Q&A. There will be an opportunity for me to answer your questions later on. We're quite a small group this evening, so make the most of this opportunity, guys. You've got an opportunity to ask me questions directly. Often with these webinars, we have hundreds of people trying to ask questions. It's very difficult to get round to them all. So make the most of the opportunity. Okay, right. So we're stuck in this cycle. How do we get out of it? How can we stop noticing this? Well, when we tune out tinnitus, if we can change your brain's reaction to the sound you hear, you'll start to tune it out. How does that work? Well, let's think about this for a second. So if we reduce that negative reaction your brain has, perhaps get rid of that negative reaction, your brain will stop thinking it's a threat. So it will no longer need to keep looking for this threat, which means you'll stop noticing it. So if we change your brain's reaction to tinnitus, two things are going to happen. One, you stop noticing it. You become less aware of it. Two, it will stop bothering you. So when these two things have happened, you stop noticing it and it stops bothering you, your life is going to change because your tinnitus will no longer have an impact on your life. You can go back to the life you had before your tinnitus got bad. If I use myself as an example, if I stop talking for a second, I can hear my tinnitus. If I listen for it, I can hear it. But it doesn't cause me a problem. I can hear it, I can listen to it. It doesn't make me feel any of those things. I can go back to the conversation I was having, or if I'm lying in bed, I can get to sleep without having to listen to a mask to distract myself. It no longer has an impact on my life because it's background noise. It's the same as the noise I would hear outside. It's the same as, the noise of the traffic. It's not a problem for me. So his anonymous attendee has asked, how do you deal with the fact it will never go away? That's a really good question. And this is probably a good time to answer that question now. So I'll answer that. So how do I deal with the fact that it will never go away? Well, because this process has happened, I don't notice my tinnitus anymore. So what was happening before, if I'd noticed my tinnitus, it would make me think, God, I'm stuck with this horrible thing for the rest of my life. This is making me miserable. But because this process has happened and I've worked to change my brain's reaction to the tinnitus, if I notice my tinnitus now, it doesn't make me feel anything. It's just like any sound that I would hear. And I go back to what I'm doing. I go back to what I was doing. So I don't need to deal with the fact that it will never go away because because I rarely notice it. I probably notice my tinnitus unintentionally. So if I intentionally listen for it, for example, in a webinar now, but unintentionally, I probably notice it 4 or 5 times per week. So it's not a problem for me. And that's what we're aiming to do. We're aiming for tinnitus to become just part of the background sounds for you. So your brain doesn't register it unless you actively listen for it. How does this feel? Like how does it actually feel to have habituated to your tinnitus, to have tuned it out? Well, this is an example I like to use. Well, the first example actually would be the example of the nose. So if you just look at your nose out of the corner of your eye, imagine suddenly you were to wake up one morning and the nose had moved to the other side of your face. And every time you looked left, you saw, if you've got a big nose like me as well, every time you looked left, you had this big nose blocking your view. It'd be quite annoying, wouldn't it? But it's not annoying in the middle because your brain's adjusted. Your brain's done this thousands of times before already. Why have I got a picture of a jet engine here? Well, think back to the last time you went on a flight. And if you haven't been on a flight recently, think back to the last time you went on a long car journey or a train journey. First few minutes, especially when the aircraft engines just turn on, they're pretty loud, aren't they? When you take off, the engines get even louder. You notice them. But within minutes into the flight, you can go back to what you were doing. Reading, have a nap, watching a film, talking to a friend. And you forget that those engines are there and you can go back to the flight and you don't really notice the sound of the engines for the whole flight. But if you do notice them, if you listen for them, they're there, they're not a problem for you. That's how it's going to be with your tinnitus, guys. Going to be there in the background, but only if you listen for it. I hope that makes sense. If that doesn't make sense to anyone, or if anyone has any questions about that, please pop it in the Q&A. So, Peter, I will come to your question at the end. It's a great question. We get this question. It's a really common question. I will come to it at the end. But first, I'm going to explain how. How can you train your brain to react differently to your tinnitus? Like, how is that even possible? Well, the research has shown that cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, is the most effective way to get there. Cognitive behavioral therapy is a type of treatment that changes our thoughts and behaviors. So over with some practice and exercises that you'll learn, we will change how you think. And by changing how you think, it will change how you behave and how you feel. So if we can change how we think and feel about our tinnitus, we'll change our reaction to the tinnitus. And remember that reaction cycle I spoke to you guys earlier about? When we change our reactions to tinnitus, that's how we start to tune it out. So cognitive behavioral therapy is essentially changing our thoughts and approach, and it's done that by that's done using some cognitive exercises and discussions that happen regularly, and in time the reaction to the tinnitus will change. So I've got a few questions now. Good question from Peter and Scott. Before I go on to the next slide, I want to answer these questions because they are actually relevant here. So Peter, you've asked. So Peter's got what sounds like some somatic neck and jaw tinnitus that changes with the movement of the neck and jaw. Now, this is common for people that have neck and jaw problems, and it's very, very bad on some days. Again, variable tinnitus, really common. And Peter's question is, can he habituate? So the answer to that is yes. The approach with habituation remains the same, regardless of the type of tinnitus. So your tinnitus could be in one ear, 9,000 kilohertz, sorry. And it could be, really bad 2 days a week, not so bad the other day a week. It could be triggered by certain things. The process for habituation is the same. You can habituate to any type of tinnitus. Doesn't matter the cause, doesn't matter the sound, habituation is the same. Now, if your tinnitus changes quite frequently, and you have lots of different sounds that change, then it might be slightly harder to habituate than if it was just a kind of a high-pitched frequency like mine is. But the process is the same. And, as I said, I've spoken to hundreds, if probably not over 1,000 people with tinnitus now. And the type of tinnitus that you have has no impact really on whether you can habituate or not. So Scott, kind of similar question. Can you habituate to really loud tinnitus? And I mean really loud. Yes, you can. The volume of tinnitus is actually determined by a few things. Firstly, it's very subjective. So if you're stressed, if there's loads of stress hormones going around in your body, adrenaline, cortisol, then your tinnitus will seem louder. If the baseline level of tinnitus is very loud, it's still possible to habituate. Think about it. The example I gave of the aircraft engines. Aircraft engines are really loud. They're really loud. They're not nice. It's not a nice sound. And imagine putting an aircraft engine outside your bedroom window. It'd be quite annoying, wouldn't it? But your brain just gets used to it. Your brain habituates to that sound. So if your brain could do it with an aircraft engine, your brain can certainly do it with tinnitus. So even if your tinnitus is loud, the process is the same. Vin, good question. So Vin says the intensity of his tinnitus increases with exercise, which makes it more noticeable. The spike lasts the next day. How do you mitigate that? Vin, that's a really tough one. Sometimes exercise can have an impact on tinnitus. And of course, it's so important that we continue to exercise and we continue to stay healthy with tinnitus, because it has such so many positive effects on physical and mental health. Again, I'll go back to what I said before. This is obviously difficult, but the process of habituation is the same, and it would revolve around changing your brain's reaction to the tinnitus when you have exercised. So I'm presuming what happens is that if you exercise and have a spike, it makes you pretty, it's quite annoying the next day, quite frustrating for you. It probably stresses you out quite a lot. So the approach here would be to change that reaction so that even if you do have a spike, you don't get annoyed by it. And then you'd actually start to notice the spike less, and probably the spikes would stop happening. So in changing your reaction to the spikes, you become less aware of them, and actually they would probably stop. Great. So let's go on. So what does the research show about tinnitus? Well, remember I showed you that slide earlier. There's nothing you can do for tinnitus. Well, this is a really, really big research study. And what they've done is they've actually combined data from, I think, 12 smaller studies and looked at the effect of cognitive behavioral therapy in tinnitus. Look at what the conclusion was. Results are consistent with previously published guidelines indicating that CBT is an effective therapy for tinnitus. And as such, it mentions the guidelines here. Tinnitus is recommended as first-line treatment, both here in the UK and in the US and in Europe. The problem is it's just so difficult to access. There aren't many healthcare professionals that are able to deliver CBT. And that's where Otto comes in. So we've actually done some research looking at our CBT our one-to-one CBT program. And I'm really excited to share the results of that research with you guys today. So I'm going to tell you guys about how the one-to-one program works, but essentially we have a 96% success rate. So for every 100 people we go through the program, 96 of those have a good result. What does a good result mean? Well, we use the habituation stages to measure the impact of tinnitus. So there's 4 stages. Most people that come into the program are actually already at stage 2 or 3. 36% will move one stage. So moving one stage would be either moving stage 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, fully habituating. 40% move 2 stages. So 1 to 3, 2 to 4. 20% move all 3 stages. So 20% fully habituate, move from stage 1 all the way to 4. So we're getting great results from this program. So question from Guy, there's one research article that uses CBT to actually focus on the tinnitus noise rather than ignore it. With decent results, needs a therapist contact. What's your thoughts on this? There's I don't know if you guys attended our webinar a few weeks back with we had a guest called Glenn Schweitzer, and he talked about focusing, using meditation and actually focusing on the sound of the tinnitus whilst meditating to habituate to it. There are a number of different approaches here. What I would say is that what we train you to do at Otto in tuning out tinnitus, this isn't ignoring the tinnitus. Ignoring the tinnitus, the assumption there is that you're actively not listening to it, i.e. you can hear it, but you're not listening to it. With habituation, you won't need to ignore it because you won't be aware of it. So, if someone's talking to me and I'm ignoring them, I can hear them talking to me. I'm just not listening. If I tune that person out, I just wouldn't be aware of that person talking to me in the first place. So there is a difference here, if that makes sense. But there are some different approaches when it comes to focusing on the tinnitus versus not focusing on the tinnitus. And yeah, there's some promising results from both sides. We tend to recommend that you experiment with different things and see what works for you. But good question, Guy. Thank you for asking that. So let's just do a time check. So we've got about 15-20 minutes left. I'm going to tell you guys now about the one-to-one program and how it works. But before I go on to that, did anyone have any more questions? Because I'm running a bit ahead of time. So if anyone's got any questions about anything I've just said or tinnitus in general, now's a great time to answer these questions. So Carl, thanks Carl for the question. So experiencing constant earache and sensitivity to high-pitched sounds, which tends to draw attention to my tinnitus, making it harder to habituate. Yeah, that's a common problem, Carl. It sounds like you have sound sensitivity, or what we call hyperacusis. So for those people that haven't heard of hyperacusis, it's essentially when you become very sensitive to sounds alongside tinnitus. It usually coexists with tinnitus, and then hearing these sounds become very difficult, very uncomfortable. And it could be certain sounds, could be someone talking, could be, high pitched sounds, could be anything really. And certain sounds just become really uncomfortable to listen to. So the approach taken is the same. We would use CBT for both tinnitus habituation and also hyperacusis. So the approach with hyperacusis would be, we would work with you on changing your reaction to these sounds instead of changing your reaction to the tinnitus. And in changing your reaction to the sounds, they would become, in time, your brain would no longer perceive them as a threat, and they would become more comfortable. So the approach would be the exact same, Carl. CBT is proven to be effective for tinnitus and sound sensitivity or hyperacusis. So Carol's asked, can you give a description of what CBT involves? Yes, great question. So CBT works on the basis that how we think determines how we feel. And we need to change how we think. So the first thing that your specialist would work with you on is really understanding the thoughts and beliefs that you have about your tinnitus. What is the emotion that it makes you feel? What experiences do you have in your life that might have led you to feel that way about the tinnitus? Did you used to listen to a lot of loud music when you were younger? Have you had problems with this kind of thing before? So we kind of do a thorough examination of what is the reason for this kind of unpleasantness associated with the tinnitus. And once we've done that, we would focus on teaching you exercises. So we'd recommend exercises, do exercises with you that aim to change the automatic process the brain has. So for example, there's an exercise in the Otto app called the stop tool. So this stop tool is something that we recommend that you try to do 3 or 4 times a day when you notice your tinnitus and it makes you feel bad. And it's to do with reframing the situation that you're currently in. But there's lots and lots of different exercises that are like this. And it's quite, we can go into a lot of detail with CBT, but it's mostly talking and then going away and practicing these kind of exercises with the Otto app. So I hope that makes sense, Carol Jean. Thank you for the question. Sean, great question. Do you recommend or include sound therapy guidance in your counselling? We don't recommend it, but we don't recommend that you don't do it. Sound therapy is something that many people find really beneficial. It can be a great distraction from the sound of the tinnitus. Many people use it to help them sleep. I sometimes use it to help me sleep. I certainly did when my tinnitus was before I'd habituated to it. What I would encourage sounds to be used for is to help you get in a relaxing state. So I would really encourage you to go through the Otto app and find a sound that you find relaxing, that you find helps calm you down, and you finds to help distract from your tinnitus. Some people will say, oh, you need to listen to this sound at this type of white noise. Don't worry about that. It's all about what works most for you. What I will say is that there's no real convincing evidence to show that sound therapy for extended periods of time will reduce the volume of your tinnitus. There is some evidence to say that sound therapy, or what we call tinnitus retraining therapy, is helpful, but CBT is kind of the gold standard, both here in the UK and in the US. Susan, you had a question. Look, Susan, I don't think I can give medical advice over here. I think this is probably something you should speak to your doctor about, whether you stay on that medication, because it's not something I can. I'm afraid it's not something I can. It's very, very specific question. It's not something I'd be able to give an answer to here. I'd definitely recommend speaking to the doctor about that. Ron, can ortho CBT help me if I believe I'm close to stage 4? Well, look, if you're not stage 4, then yes, we can. We actually get a lot of people on stage 3, quite far through stage 3, that just need a bit of help. They've maybe plateaued a little, and they just need a bit of help kind of getting that final push to full habituation and getting their lives, and getting tinnitus out of their lives. So yes, absolutely, Ron, we can. So what about hearing aids used to treat tinnitus? What's your opinion? Vin, really good question. So a hearing aid actually technically is a type of sound therapy. And when I said that sound therapy isn't beneficial for tinnitus in the long term, I was wrong, because I forgot to mention hearing aids. So if you have certain degree of hearing loss that's seen on an audiogram, that's visible on an audiogram, and you have tinnitus, your tinnitus may be improved with a hearing aid. So it's been shown that hearing aids can be helpful if you have tinnitus plus a degree of hearing loss. But yes, hearing aids can be helpful. Obviously, it's only helpful whilst you've got the hearing aid in. So, if you take the hearing aid out at night, your tinnitus will come back, and it's not going to reduce the volume of the tinnitus in the long term, but they can be helpful to mask the tinnitus during the day. And they have been shown to be beneficial in tinnitus. So if you have a hearing loss, then hearing aids are recommended here in the UK. If you don't have a hearing loss, then I definitely wouldn't recommend a hearing aid. The other thing with hearing aids is that they are fairly expensive. But you can kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone by managing the hearing loss and also managing the tinnitus. So yeah, Vin, really good point. I would, if you haven't had a hearing test, guys, definitely have a hearing test, because a hearing aid could be helpful. So Peter, so look, I've not heard anything about this. So Peter's question is, do benzodiazepines, these are a type of medication for anxiety, do these medications weaken neuroplasticity? This isn't something I've heard of. This isn't something I've read about, so I wouldn't be able to comment. I don't want to say 100%, don't worry about it, because I might be wrong, but it's not something I've heard of. What I know is that habituation, the process is the same regardless of the circumstances you're in. So, sometimes it takes a bit longer, sometimes it might be shorter. I would certainly say that CBT would be helpful for you, yes. Susan, question. Is it useful to use hearing aids with sound generator incorporated? Yes, if you find that helpful. So it kind of depends on what you define as useful. If you find it helpful, Susan, then yeah, I think with sound therapy, as I go back to what I said before, if it's something you find beneficial and if it's something you find helps you, then yes. However, it's not going to change the volume of the tinnitus in the long term. It's not going to help you habituate. It's just kind of more of a short-term benefit, short-term relief, if that makes sense. Rick, do we prescribe hearing aids, and do you use masking tinnitus? We don't provide hearing aids. We have we have kind of looked into it. It's something we may look into in the future. Do I personally use masking for tinnitus? I use masking for tinnitus if I've had a stressful day or I'm going for a stressful period and my tinnitus is louder before I go to sleep. So I will just open the app and find the sound of a thunderstorm, and I'll play that for half an hour and it'll help me get to sleep. I probably would need to use that maybe 3 or 4 times a month. Before I was using it every day, but at the moment it's not a problem for me. Guys, thank you. Really, really good questions. Really good questions. So I'm going to tell you about the one-to-one coaching program now and how it works. If you want to try tuning out tinnitus, then the one-to-one coaching program is going to be really good for you if A, you want to get there quickly. So we've built this to get you quick results. I'm talking weeks, not months. And B, if you want help, if you want a lot of help from us along the way. So if you're the type of person that just wants to be told what to do, and then you just need to go away and do it, then this is really great for you, because you'll work directly with a specialist one-on-one, and your specialist will build you a personalized plan. So this is how it works. So we've included all these aspects of this program, and packed as much value in there as possible for you. So what's included? Let me talk you through this. So you'll have access to the digital CBT program in the app to work through on your own. You'll get 2 one-to-one specialist sessions per month. They last 45 minutes each. So what you learn with the specialist, you'll put into practice using the app. We'll build you a custom habituation plan. So this is to ensure that you get the results as quickly as possible, because we take into context what's going on with your tinnitus. So how your tinnitus makes you feel, the impact it has on your life, do you struggle with sleep, that kind of thing. You know, we want it to be really focused to you. So we'll build you this plan, and this plan will be accessible in your app. Your specialist will give you sessions to go and practice, and you'll be able to get these straight through the Otto app. You'll get direct access to, or priority access to, ask. Each month we have a tinnitus success story webinar. You'll get priority access to questions. So these are really popular, these webinars, and the success story webinars. And we get a lot of questions. If you want to learn directly from people that already have habituated to tinnitus and tuned it out, you'll get priority access. And you also get priority support from our team. You saw who we worked with earlier. Any questions you've got, you can send us a message through the app, and you'll get priority access to that. So it costs £249 per month, and it includes all of this. You can cancel anytime. So even if you wanted to just do 1 month, 2 sessions, get some more personalized help for just a month, you'd be able to do that. I would say to get to habituation very much depends on your stage of tinnitus, but people usually work with us for between 2 and 6 months. And that very much depends on how much ongoing help do you like? Do you find it helpful to have someone regularly to speak to? It also depends on how much work you put in. So if you put in the work with the specialist, and you put the practice in every day, it's going to take you much less time to get there. So it's £249 per month. You can cancel any time. There's no contract or anything. If you're in the US, that's $319. So guys, I have a really special offer for you guys. If you want to sign up today, in the next 24 hours, you will get a free 30-minute call with me. So you can hear about my personal experience with tinnitus, find out what worked for me, what didn't. I can give you some personalized advice based on my own experience and based on, the experience I've had with Otto. I've spoken to over 1,000 people, probably over 1,000 people with tinnitus now. So I can give you some really niche advice for what might work for you. You're also going to get a year's access to the Otto app. So this means that you're going to be fully equipped to manage your tinnitus spikes, whatever else it throws at you for the next year. But even if you just wanted to do 1 month, 2 sessions, that'd be a great way to get access to the app for a year, which would normally cost £120, $140, $150. So if you sign up in the next 24 hours, you get these 2 things. Sorry, we don't offer a guarantee. Those slides are wrong for this, but we do have 2 success stories. So Vernon, we did a success story with a couple of months ago. Vernon came to us when he was a stage 3. He'd plateaued and he wanted a bit of help getting to stage 4. He worked with us for a couple of months and he got great results. Tinnitus no longer impacts his life. Thomas, some of you may have seen a couple of weeks ago. He is actually an opera singer, and he had real problems because obviously opera singers make a lot of sound, and when they're singing, and that was actually impacting his tinnitus. So he was quite a complex one. But he got a really great result. And again, he's gone back to singing now. He's full flow with the music, with his music. And he's really habituated really well. He's also stage 4. Great question from Peter. Will you see the same specialist each time? Yes, of course. So a bit about the specialists. We work with the UK's top tinnitus experts. So we only work with people that are very experienced in CBT for tinnitus specifically. It's very niche. And we find the UK's top tinnitus CBT specialists and work with them. Peter, you'd be working with the same one. It's very important to work with the same one so you can build a relationship with the specialist throughout the program. We definitely don't want to be mixing things up. Great. So guys, £249 per month for this. Sign up in the next 24 hours. You'll get the call with me and a year's access to the Ortho app. If you want to sign up, I will put a link in the chat now. And you can sign up now. If you want to go away and think about it tonight, then I will also email you. I will send you a follow-up email with all this information. So that's just gone in the chat there. I'll send you a follow-up email with all this information. And if you do have any questions, you can let me know. Did anyone have any more questions now? Because if they do, I'm very happy to help. We've got a few more minutes. Cameron sent me a link yesterday, sign up. Can I use that? Yes, Peter, please use Cameron's link. Please use Cameron's link. That link will still work. Well, if no one has any more questions, I'd like to say thank you again for joining us all. I hope you found this helpful. Great to have you join us, Peter. Looking forward to working with you. What I will say before you go, guys, is we only have a few slots available for next week. So if you want to get started quickly, these slots do fill up fast. So the quicker you can let us know, the more likely we'll be able to get you in quickly, because slots are limited. Caljean, thank you very much. Thank you for joining. I hope you found that helpful. I'm glad you've got a better understanding of the program and how it works. And if you have any questions, please, you'll have my email address. I'm very happy to help. Thank you, Rick. Thank you very much for joining. We run these webinars every week, so please sign up to the next one, and I'll see you next week.